1935. A remote castle in Westphalia, Germany. Wewelsburg Castle has been commandeered by Heinrich Himmler, head of the SS. But this isn't a military headquarters. It's something stranger. Himmler is transforming the castle into a mystical center for the SS, a spiritual fortress. In the North Tower, he's creating a ceremonial hall, 12 pedestals arranged in a circle, like King Arthur's Round Table. But these aren't for knights. They're for SS generals, the Knights of the Holy Grail. Below the hall, in the crypt, a strange circular room with a domed ceiling. A flame burns in the center. This is where Himmler believes he can contact ancient Germanic spirits, channel mystical Aryan power. In the castle library, books on astrology, rune magic, ancient Norse mythology, the Holy Grail, Atlantis. SS scholars pore over medieval texts, searching for proof of Aryan racial supremacy stretching back thousands of years. This isn't science. This isn't history. This is occultism, mysticism, magic. And it's being funded and promoted by one of the most powerful organizations in Nazi Germany. The question isn't whether the Nazis believed in the supernatural. The question is, how deep did this obsession go? And did it influence their decisions? From astrology to ancient artifacts, from rune magic to expeditions to Tibet, from the spear of destiny to the search for the Holy Grail, the Third Reich was obsessed with the occult. Welcome to the strangest chapter of Nazi history.
To understand Nazi occultism, we need to go back before Hitler even came to power. Late 19th century Germany was awash in mystical movements, theosophy, anthroposophy, Ariosophy, folkish movements. These weren't fringe beliefs, they were mainstream among certain intellectual circles. The basic ideas? Ancient Aryan civilizations possessed advanced knowledge. This knowledge was lost, but could be recovered. Germanic peoples were descended from these superior ancients. Through mystical practices, Germans could reclaim their destiny. These ideas mixed. Legitimate archaeology, badly misinterpreted. Hindu and Buddhist concepts, cherry-picked and twisted. Norse mythology, romanticized and racialized. Medieval mysticism, the Grail legends, Arthurian myths. Pseudoscience about race and evolution. From this toxic soup emerged several key figures who influenced Nazi ideology. Guido von List, 1848 to 1919. List was an Austrian occultist who claimed to have recovered ancient Germanic runic wisdom. He taught that an ancient priesthood called the Armananschaft once ruled Germanic tribes with secret knowledge. This knowledge was encoded in runes, ancient symbols that supposedly held magical power. List's followers included many who would later join the Nazi Party. Jörg Lanz von Liebenfels, 1874 to 1954. A former monk who created a racist occult philosophy called Ariosophy. He published a magazine called Ostara that mixed occultism with virulent anti-Semitism and Aryan racial theory. The young Adolf Hitler read Ostara in Vienna. Some historians believe it influenced his developing worldview. Liebenfels preached that Aryans were descended from gods, that they had to maintain racial purity or lose their divine powers. The Thule Society, founded 1918. This was the direct link between occultism and the Nazi Party. The Thule Society was a secret occult group in Munich that combined belief in ancient Aryan civilizations, Germanic paganism and rune magic, extreme nationalism,
and violent anti-Semitism. Members included Rudolf Hess, who would become Hitler's deputy, Hans Frank, future Nazi governor of occupied Poland, and Dietrich Eckart, early Nazi Party member and Hitler's mentor. The Thule Society helped fund and organize the early Nazi Party. Its symbol? A swastika, superimposed on a sword. The swastika itself. The swastika is an ancient symbol found in many cultures, Hindu, Buddhist, Native American. But the Nazis adopted it as a symbol of Aryan power and racial superiority. They believed it was a rune of power, a symbol that could channel cosmic energy. Hitler personally designed the Nazi flag, carefully choosing the colors and placement for maximum mystical impact. Did Hitler believe this? Here's where it gets complicated. Hitler himself was inconsistent about occultism. In public and in Mein Kampf, he sometimes mocked mysticism as impractical. But in private, he was fascinated by astrology, fate, and providence. He frequently spoke of being guided by providence or destiny. After surviving the July 20, 1944 assassination attempt, he declared, "Providence has saved me to complete my mission." Hitler consulted astrologers. He was obsessed with Wagner's operas, which are filled with Germanic mythology and mysticism. He collected ancient artifacts he believed held power. But the real believer wasn't Hitler. It was Heinrich Himmler.
If Hitler flirted with the occult, Himmler married it. Himmler, Reichsfuhrer SS, was a true believer in mysticism, reincarnation, and supernatural Aryan power. He genuinely believed he was the reincarnation of Heinrich I, a 10th-century German king. He visited Heinrich I's tomb and claimed to communicate with his spirit. And Himmler had the power and resources to turn his beliefs into reality. The Ahnenerbe, 1935 to 1945. In 1935, Himmler founded the Ahnenerbe, the Ancestral Heritage Research and Teaching Society. Officially, it was a research institute to study Germanic history and archaeology. In reality, it was an occult research organization funded by the SS. The Ahnenerbe's missions included searching for proof of ancient Aryan civilizations, expeditions to Tibet searching for remnants of an Aryan master race, archaeological digs across Europe looking for Germanic artifacts, attempts to prove that all great civilizations were founded by Aryans, studying runes and mystical symbols. SS scholars analyzed medieval runes for hidden meanings, developed runic magic rituals for SS ceremonies, believed certain symbols could channel power, investigating ancient religious artifacts, the Holy Grail, the Spear of Destiny, the spear that pierced Christ's side, Norse and Germanic sacred objects, Wewelsburg Castle, the SS Camelot. Himmler's crown jewel was Wewelsburg Castle in Westphalia. Beginning in 1934, he transformed it into a mystical center for the SS elite. Features included the Obergruppenführersaal, the SS General's Hall, 12 pedestals arranged in a circle, each for an SS general, Himmler's knights, explicitly modeled on King Arthur's Round Table. The center? A swastika inlaid in the floor. The crypt below, a circular room with 12 pillars, an eternal flame in the center, supposedly where Himmler held seances and mystical rituals. Some say it was designed for human sacrifice. No evidence, but the rumor persists. The SS rituals. Himmler created elaborate pseudo-religious ceremonies for the SS. Marriage ceremonies. SS officers married under Aryan rituals, no Christian elements allowed. Couples received a special life rune candlestick, oaths sworn to racial purity. Solstice celebrations.
Summer and winter solstice were major SS holidays, replaced Christmas with Yule, a pagan Germanic celebration. Bonfires, rune singing, mystical oaths. Death rituals, elaborate pagan funeral rites, bodies of high-ranking SS buried with runes and ancient symbols. Belief in Valhalla, the warrior's afterlife from Norse mythology. The Tibet expedition, 1938 to 1939. One of the strangest Ahnenerbe projects was the expedition to Tibet led by Ernst Schaefer. Officially, scientific research on Tibetan wildlife and culture. Unofficially, Himmler believed Tibet might hold remnants of an ancient Aryan civilization. The team measured skulls of Tibetans, trying to prove racial theories, collected artifacts and texts, searched for the legendary city of Shambhala, investigated claims of Aryan origins in the Himalayas. The expedition found nothing that supported their theories, but Himmler remained convinced. The Witch Trials Project. In one of the bizarrest Ahnenerbe projects, Himmler became obsessed with medieval witch trials, but not for the reasons you'd think. Himmler believed the witch trials were actually a Christian conspiracy to suppress ancient Germanic paganism. He thought witches were actually priestesses of the old Germanic religion. He ordered research into witch trials across Europe, trying to prove this theory. It was nonsense, but thousands of hours and resources were devoted to it. Did it matter? Here's the key question. Was this just weird hobby activity, or did it influence Nazi actions? The answer is complicated. On one hand, the occult beliefs didn't change military strategy or major policy. Hitler didn't invade Poland because of astrology. But on the other hand, it reinforced racial ideology. The mystical Aryan mythology gave pseudo-religious justification for racism and genocide. It created rituals of loyalty. The SS ceremonies bound members together in a cult-like organization. It wasted resources. During the war, the Ahnenerbe continued its expeditions and research, using funds and personnel needed elsewhere. It attracted fanatics. The occult elements attracted true believers, who were often the most ruthless enforcers of Nazi policy. The occult didn't cause the Holocaust, but it provided a mythological framework that made atrocity seem like cosmic destiny.
The Nazis' obsession with the occult led them to hunt for legendary artifacts. They believed these objects held supernatural power. The Spear of Destiny, also called the Holy Lance, or Spear of Longinus. Legend, this was the spear a Roman soldier used to pierce Christ's side during the crucifixion. Medieval legend claimed, whoever possesses the spear controls the fate of the world. The spear was kept in the Hofburg Museum in Vienna. When Hitler annexed Austria in 1938, one of his first acts was to seize the spear and transport it to Nuremberg. Hitler supposedly believed the spear gave him invincibility. After the war, the spear was returned to Vienna. Historians note the actual spear in the Hofburg Museum dates from the 7th century at earliest. It's not the biblical spear, but Hitler didn't care. The Holy Grail. Himmler was obsessed with finding the Holy Grail. He believed it was hidden somewhere in southern France or northern Spain. He sent Ahnenerbe researchers to Montségur in France, site of the last Cathar stronghold. The theory? The Cathars had possessed the Grail, and it was hidden when their fortress fell. Ahnenerbe teams dug through the ruins, interviewed locals, studied medieval texts. They found nothing. But Himmler kept searching, resources devoted to Grail hunting during the war. The Ark of the Covenant. Some Nazi researchers became convinced the Ark of the Covenant from the Bible was hidden in Ethiopia or the Middle East. Plans were drawn up for expeditions to find it. The war prevented most of these missions. Yes, this sounds like Raiders of the Lost Ark because that movie was inspired by real Nazi artifact hunting. Astrology and fortune-telling. Many high-ranking Nazis consulted astrologers and fortune-tellers. Rudolf Hess, Hitler's deputy, was a devoted believer in astrology. In 1941, Hess flew alone to Scotland in a bizarre attempt to negotiate peace with Britain. Why? Astrologers had told him the stars were aligned for peace. The mission was a disaster. Hess was captured. Hitler was furious. After this, Hitler banned astrology, at least officially. But privately, many Nazis continued consulting fortune tellers. The Karl Marie Willigut affair. Karl Marie Willigut was Himmler's personal spiritual advisor from 1933 to 1939. Willigut claimed to have ancestral memories going back thousands of years. He said he could remember ancient Germanic civilizations. He designed SS runes and symbols, including the SS Death's Head ring. Problem? Willigut had been institutionalized in a psychiatric hospital in the 1920s for claiming to be descendant from Germanic gods. When this became public in 1939, even Himmler had to quietly dismiss him. But the symbols Willigut created remained central to the SS. Did the Nazis find anything real? Short answer, no. They found artifacts, they found ancient texts, they conducted archaeology, but they never found proof of ancient Aryan super-civilizations. They never found magical artifacts with real power. They never discovered secret mystical knowledge. Everything they discovered was either misinterpreted legitimate archaeology, forged evidence, wishful thinking, or outright delusion. But that didn't stop them from believing. The propaganda value. Even if the occult research found nothing real, it had propaganda value. The Nazis used mystical imagery in rallies. Nuremberg rallies were theatrical spectacles. Architecture, imposing mythological designs. Symbols, runes, swastikas, eagles. Pageantry, torchlight parades, solstice celebrations. This created an atmosphere of destiny and inevitability. Germans weren't just voting for a political party, they were joining a cosmic struggle. This was powerful psychological manipulation.
After the war, the Nazi occult connection took on a life of its own. Books, movies, conspiracy theories. The Nazi occult became a pop culture phenomenon. But we need to separate fact from fiction. What's real? Himmler genuinely believed in mysticism and the occult. The Ahnenerbe was a real organization that conducted expeditions. Wewelsburg Castle was designed as an SS mystical center. The Nazis did hunt for artifacts like the Spear of Destiny. SS rituals incorporated pagan and occult elements. Many Nazis consulted astrologers. Nazi symbolism deliberately used mystical imagery. What's exaggerated or false? Hitler was not a practicing occultist or magician. The Nazis didn't have access to real supernatural powers. The Thule Society's influence is often overstated. Most Nazi occult books mix facts with sensational fiction. Claims of Nazi contact with aliens, demons, or other dimensions? Complete fiction. The Nazis didn't find any real magical artifacts. Nazi UFOs and Antarctica bases, Cold War myths with no basis in fact. Why do the myths persist? Several reasons. It makes Nazis seem even more evil. If they were occultists trafficking with dark forces, it adds a supernatural dimension to their evil. It's entertaining. Indiana Jones, Hellboy, Wolfenstein games. The Nazi occult is great fiction. It suggests hidden secrets. Conspiracy theories thrive on the idea that there's more to the story. Post-war propaganda. Both sides of the Cold War sometimes exaggerated Nazi mysticism for their own purposes. What really mattered? The Nazi interest in the occult reveals something important. They were not rational actors. They made decisions based on racial pseudoscience, mystical destiny, ideological fanaticism, personality cults. This wasn't a regime guided by logic or reason. This was a regime guided by myths, symbols, and a belief in racial destiny. And that made them more dangerous,
not less. Because they weren't just fighting for territory or resources, they were fighting for a mythological vision. A vision where Aryans were destined to rule, where racial purity was sacred, where their enemies weren't just opponents, but cosmic evil. The occult elements reinforced this worldview. They made compromise impossible, negotiation pointless, defeat unthinkable. You can negotiate with someone who wants territory. You can't negotiate with someone who believes they're fulfilling cosmic destiny. The modern far right. Unfortunately, some modern far-right and neo-Nazi groups have embraced this occult legacy. They use runes. They reference Thule society mythology. They claim to be reviving ancient Aryan traditions. This is dangerous nonsense, but it shows the lasting appeal of these myths.
So, what do we make of the Occult Reich? Was it a sideshow? A bizarre footnote to Nazi history? Or was it central to understanding how the Third Reich functioned? The truth is somewhere in between. Hitler wasn't a wizard. Himmler didn't have magical powers. The SS weren't warlocks. But they believed. Or at least, many of them believed. And belief has power. The mystical elements of Nazism served several functions. Psychological. They created a sense of destiny and inevitability. Soldiers weren't just following orders, they were fulfilling ancient prophecy. Social. The rituals bound SS members together in a cult-like brotherhood. This created fierce loyalty. Ideological. The Aryan mythology provided religious justification for racism and genocide. Propaganda. The pageantry, symbols, and mystical imagery made Nazism seem larger than life. Did the occult cause World War II or the Holocaust? No. Did it make these atrocities easier to commit? Possibly. When you believe you're enacting cosmic destiny, conscience becomes negotiable. Today, we look back at Nazi occultism with a mixture of fascination and disbelief. How could educated people believe this nonsense? But that's the wrong question. The right question is, how do belief systems, even irrational ones, shape behavior? The Nazis didn't need real magic. They needed people who believed in magic. They needed followers convinced they were part of something greater than themselves. They needed soldiers willing to die and kill for a myth. And they got them. The swastika wasn't powerful because it was magical. It was powerful because millions believed it was. The SS rituals weren't effective because they channeled cosmic energy. They were effective because they created fanatical loyalty. The Aryan mythology wasn't true, but it motivated real actions with real consequences. That's the lesson of the Occult Reich. Myths and symbols have power, not supernatural power, but human power. The power to motivate, to unite, to justify. And when those myths are built on hate and racial supremacy, they become deadly. The Nazis searched for the Holy Grail and found nothing. They hunted for the spear of destiny and gained no power from it. They excavated ruins across Europe and discovered no ancient Aryan civilizations. But in the process, they created a mythological framework that enabled the deaths of millions. That's the real darkness at the heart of the Occult Reich. Not supernatural evil, just human evil, dressed up in mystical clothing. And perhaps that's more terrifying than any ghost story.